Final Destination in 2000 was a box office hit despite mixed critical reviews, which meant franchise. The sequel followed a similar format with characters cheating death thanks to a premonition before it comes back for them one by one. Except this time it isn't a plane crash, it's a bunch of logs. Well, specifically logs that fall off the back of a truck and cause a major pileup. Nearly every retrospective on this movie says that what the first movie did for planes, this movie did for trucks. That's probably true. I didn't even see this movie growing up. But thanks to those commercials, I was terrified of those logging trucks. If I ever saw one on the road, I immediately started screaming and swerving to block traffic. Let's get into the movie. As always, while I recap, the ranking algorithm will appear to add or subtract points, so by the end it will have an objective and precise score to see how this movie ranks against all the rest. 1 year to the day after the Flight 180 crash, Kimberly Corman and her friends pile into an SUV for a trip to Daytona for spring break. Though Kimberly is starting to get paranoid, not just due to the specter of Flight 180, but also the kids on the bus chanting "pileup," "Highway to Hell" on the radio, a call from her dad warning her the car is leaking transmission fluid, she needs to get it checked, the guy drinking a beer in the driver's seat of a truck, the kids smashing two toy trucks against each other. Despite her friend's assurances everything is fine, minutes later, a certain chain breaks, one holding in place those logs on that truck. The first one crashes through a police car, beheading Officer Thomas Burke. The chain reaction of logs bouncing on the highway, cars and motorcycles swerving, and resulting explosions kills 26 people, including Kimberly and her 3 friends. Until Kimberly is back in the driver's seat at the entrance ramp, some kids chanting "pileup," "Highway to Hell" on the radio. It's all happening just like it did in her vision. But maybe she has a chance to change things. She turns the SUV to block the entrance ramp, which pisses off a lot of people and quickly gets the attention of Officer Burke. Before long, that truck from hell speeds down the highway, and everyone knows Kimberly was right. So many die. When another truck speeds toward the SUV, Burke tackles Kimberly out of the way. She's saved. Her friends aren't so lucky. After the original, this movie knows what we're looking for, and it delivers. By moving the disaster from a plane to a highway, the catastrophe can be more drawn out and include more of a variety of kills. Some are struck by logs, some are burned, some are crushed. I'll feel disgusted with myself if I keep listing them all. It also touches on a fear that feels familiar. We've all seen those trucks and wondered, what if, and I hope not. The opening definitely delivers on the action and even manages to surprise by killing Kimberly's friends after the premonition, when you would have expected them to be part of the main cast. Of course, while it's a surprise, it isn't much more than that. We don't care that they died, because the characters are hardly characters at all. The movie isn't reaching for real tension or stakes, just fun kills at a decent clip, which likely holds it back from getting too high on the meter. Tonally, the movie doesn't hit quite the same note as the original. That one had its flaws, but at least in the beginning, it built a paranoid mood with Alex slowly getting more anxious. Kimberly gets to panic mode pretty fast, and signs are all less subtle. People literally chanting "pileup," a kid smashing trucks together. It also suffers from genre clash, where it doesn't commit enough to either taking itself seriously or becoming a full-on horror comedy. A.J. Cook as Kimberly is giving it her all and taking it seriously, while surrounded by an SNL sketch interpretation of what happens on highways. Nearly every vehicle contains some kind of illegal activity. Alcohol, cocaine, reefer, public indecency. Back at the police station, the survivors gather. Kimberly tells them about her premonition, how it's just like what happened with Flight 180, now common knowledge. How all the survivors died in freak accidents except one, Clear Rivers, now living in a padded cell. By the way, you heard me right. I said Clear. I'm not mispronouncing the name Claire. I am very clearly saying the word Clear. And that is her name. Look here at the end credits. So I don't want to see a bunch of comments like on my timeline video, "Bro, who pronounces Claire that way?" Also, Burke said there was one survivor, which tells us Alex Browning is dead. We'll learn how later. Considering the fate of the Flight 180 survivors, does that mean death is coming for these Route 23 survivors too? Some are skeptical, some are spooked. Recent lottery winner Evan Lewis just wants to get home, and soon he does. He carries a brand new iMac and a few other things, nearly tripping over the children's toys left in the hall. Now, lunchtime, or breakfast, hard to tell what the hell meal this is. Evan finds old spaghetti in the pan, so he tosses it out the window, then gets cooking. When a draft comes through, he doesn't notice it's knocked a magnet off his fridge and into his leftovers, leaving behind the word I spelled from the remaining magnets. He puts those leftovers in the microwave. The resulting sparks startle him, and he drops a new ring down the drain. He reaches his hand in and gets himself stuck there thanks to a new watch. More sparks, his pan catches fire. He tries to put it out, knocks it over, and now his apartment is on fire. He gets his hand out and with the door blocked by fire, runs for the windows, which spontaneously close. He breaks one open and climbs down the fire escape just as his place explodes. He's free, only the ladder gets stuck. He gives it a few yanks and reaches the ground when he slips on that old spaghetti and lands on the broken glass from his window. Painful, but not lethal. The ladder falls but stops short of hitting him. Wow, that was a close one. And the ladder falls again, this time into his brain, through his eye, just like the fridge warned. One of the best death scenes in the franchise. So many red herrings, the toys, the fire, the hand in the garbage disposal. There's also some humor. Evan is a recent lottery winner, so while he fights the growing fire, in the background you hear a series of messages on his machine from girls he knows that are suddenly a lot more interested in him. But best of all, rather than just watching someone die, this scene feels like Evan wrestling with death. He escapes so many close calls, it genuinely feels like he might escape with his life. Since you don't know who is going to come out on top, Evan or Death, it's a more thrilling experience. Back at the station, Officer Burke does some research on Flight 180, and that's how we learn the fate of Alex Browning, killed by a falling brick. On a personal level, I hate it because I liked Alex, but objectively, it fits the theme. No one is safe. No one can truly escape death, and even the heroes can die in a way as mundane as a falling brick. As the other survivors hear about Evan, all start to take the idea they're in danger a little more seriously. That night, as the shadows of tree branches stretch across Kimberly's bedroom ceiling, she notices something else. Death's hands reaching out to her. She realizes she needs help. To the internet once again, she reads about clear rivers and gets directions to the Stony Brook Institution from MapQuest. Also, hey, AIM 4.7 is out. I gotta check that out. The next day, Kimberly pays Clear a visit. She finds that Clear is understandably cynical. All her friends are dead and she only clings to life through sheer isolation. But she does provide some insight. With her and Alex, everyone died in the same order they died in the premonition, the order they should have died, though in Kimberly's case, death seems to be working backwards. She and her friends died last in the premonition, then her friends died first right after the accident. Kimberly was only spared thanks to Burke's intervention. Clear offers some advice. Look out for signs, and look out for yourself. Forget about the others. Kimberly can't believe it. She calls Clear bitter and selfish, and she leaves. In a franchise that struggles with or avoids character development altogether, it's refreshing to see one of them return and show some transformation. Clear is no longer an artsy high schooler excited at the prospect of breaking into a funeral home. Now she's a hardened survivor, obsessing over death in a padded room. There's also some dark comedy in the long list of things Kimberly isn't allowed to bring into the room.
Nail files, pencils, pens, safety pins, matches, lighters, belts, belt buckles, food, drinks, keys, cell phone. You have a cell phone on you?
This scene also points to improved pacing. The first movie struggled with filling the time between kills, often falling on drama that doesn't really land. The best parts are watching Alex play chess against death, learning the rules and trying to outsmart his foe. This movie finds more ways to lean into that idea, like visiting Clear and researching the past incident. Returning home, Kimberly finds Burke on her doorstep. He's a believer now too. They have little time to talk before she spots the reflection of pigeons that aren't really there. A sign. Working backwards, Nora and Tim died before Evan in her premonition, so they should be next, and somehow it'll involve pigeons. But first, the dentist appointment from hell. Pigeons smack into the window, and one gets into the waiting area. While the dentist leaves Tim to help with the bird, water leaks from the aquarium onto the socket, shutting off the oxygen while the nitrous oxide continues to flow. Tim is helpless to move as a pufferfish decoration falls into his mouth. He nearly chokes until the receptionist spots it and saves his life. Outside, Burke and Kimberly arrive just in time to warn them about pigeons, which only draws Tim's attention to the pigeons. He does the only natural thing and charges into the flock, putting him right in the path of a falling pane of glass from a construction site. Another great death scene, though a lot of that is already baked into the score. More red herrings? Hey, herrings like the fish! With all the buildup in the dentist's office, you expect it to happen there, by electrocution, gas overdose, or choking, and it leans again onto a familiar fear. All the sharp objects inserted into your mouth at the dentist, the feeling of being stuck in one place with your mouth wide open, and who knows what happens while you're unconscious.
If he gives me the gas and I wake up with my pants unbuttoned, we ain't paying.
I'm damaged goods now.
At Stony Brook, Clear decides she will join the fight after all, and takes Kimberly to someone who might be able to shed some light. William Bloodworth, the mortician from the first movie who seems in tune with death somehow. They beg his help. How can they escape death? Finally, he provides an answer. Only new life can defeat death. For every life, there's a death. And for every death, there is a life. But the introduction of life that was not meant to be, that can invalidate the list, force death to start anew. It's fun to see Tony Todd again. Given the lack of a tangible villain in these movies, he is a strong addition whose performance gives death a mysterious and sinister voice. It also speaks again to this movie's pacing, finding more interesting ways to spend time between kills. There was the visit to Clear earlier, and now this. It's also nice that the movie adds a new rule, opening the door to the possibility these characters might survive. Maybe there's actually a way to win. That's pretty important, especially now that Alex is dead and Clear has only survived through total isolation. It implies there really is no winning, and the ending is a foregone conclusion, in which case, why are we watching? So the characters might win, but there is one problem. It's hard to care too much one way or the other. Like in the original, these characters are hardly developed. There are moments like this which don't land at all.
I'm so scared.
I know you didn't ask for any of this, but I don't think you have it in you to quit either.
How do you know if she has it in her to quit or not? Unless he's watching a director's cut that actually tells us something about these characters, and there's no real barometer on where these characters stand on everything they're dealing with, like this moment.
Follow the signs? I mean, where did you find that guy?
How can Officer Burke laugh off everything Bloodworth said to them when he's already bought into the idea that they're on death's list? Also, I get Bloodworth has to talk in riddles, but the characters are way too okay with this. If my life was on the line and I thought someone had the answers, I can't imagine how angry I'd get if they refused to speak plainly. I wouldn't hold it against these characters if they got violent with Bloodworth, or at least threatened it until he gave actual answers. As it stands, it comes off a tad unrealistic. After that, Kimberly gets a vision of drowning in a van. That reminds Burke there was a pregnant woman in a van on Route 23, and that gives Clear an idea. Only new life can defeat death. Maybe if that woman gives birth to a baby that would have died in the car crash, a brand new soul that was never part of death's design, it throws the whole list out of whack, and they start over with a clean slate. Burke finds the woman, Isabella, and reports her van stolen so she'll get picked up. In the meantime, Burke, Kimberly, and Clear meet the other survivors for a chat. They talk about what they've learned and plan for what comes next. But not everyone is on board. Eugene and Nora decide to leave. That's when Rory opens the closet and ends up under a pile of junk. He's okay, but now that random junk in the closet casts a shadow of a man with hooks. Could that be a sign? The answer is yes, but too late for them to do anything about it because Nora and Eugene are on the elevator with that man right now. A man holding a basket of prosthetic hands, including some with hooks. Nora's hair gets caught in one, so when she tries to leave, her head gets caught between the elevator doors. After watching her head fall off, Eugene storms back into the room with the others and decides he will not die by someone else's design. He's going to go out on his own terms. He puts a revolver to his head and pulls the trigger. The gun doesn't fire, so he pulls it 5 more times. But it seems you cannot die until death deems it's your time. And right now, it isn't Eugene's turn. This death isn't as intricate as the others. It leans more on humor in the lead-up, with a nervous Rory working up the courage to open a closet, and the sheer absurdity of the sign, a man with hooks. There's also the hook man smelling Nora's hair before Eugene gives him that silent WTF. The kill also leans again on something we've all thought about. What if you got caught in the elevator doors and it didn't stop? Those are always more effective chills. The ones that lean on something we've all thought about, that's always more effective. Finally, it's also fun to learn more about death's rules, and the idea you can't die is interesting. It'd be cool to see that come into play more. I'd love to see that idea really tested. Like, how far would death go to save your life until it's your turn? It is a bit frustrating though. The chess match between the survivors and death drives the action between kills. But aside from learning a couple more rules, these characters hardly ever take any positive steps forward. They look out for signs, but the signs never actually help. Look out for the pigeons, too late. Look out for the man with hooks, too late. It's more of a roller coaster thrill ride if there are some wins mixed into all the losses, as opposed to the current plunge toward death. They leave the apartment in search of the pregnant woman Isabella, who has already been picked up and tossed in a cell for her own good. But her water just broke, so it looks like the cop on duty will be driving her to the hospital himself. The other survivors, piled into Kat's SUV, realize something. Route 23 was not the first time they cheated death. Each of them had done it once before. Further, they realized they all owe their lives to Alex Browning and the others who got off Flight 180. For example, Rory was supposed to die in a theater collapse in Paris, but he ended up not going to the theater after witnessing a guy killed by a falling sign. Carter. If Carter died on Flight 180, he wouldn't have been killed by a falling sign, and Rory would have gone to the theater where he would have died. Kimberly should have been killed with her mom in a carjacking, but she got held up watching a news report on Todd's bathtub death. Eugene was supposed to be killed by a student who brought a knife to class, but instead he was transferred to another school when Miss Luton died in her home. Some call this a plot hole, because let's say Miss Luton died on Flight 180 instead. Wouldn't Eugene still have been transferred? Meaning whether Luton was on the flight or not, Eugene would have avoided that knife. I say not necessarily. The teacher died in her home 39 days after Flight 180 crashed. A lot can change in 39 days. Transfers, substitutions, etc. Maybe if she had died when she was supposed to 39 days earlier, someone else would have been transferred rather than Eugene. In any case, it's a cool twist. A surprising way to connect this story to the first movie that makes sense in retrospect. Having a bunch of people walking around for an extra month or so would have a butterfly effect. It's fun to think about how that would further meddle with Death's designs. Though the logic starts to falter when they use this to explain why Death is working backwards in this movie. So here's how it goes. If you mess with Death's design, he kills you in the order you were supposed to die. But if you are saved indirectly thanks to someone else cheating Death's design, he'll try to kill you along with everyone else saved in a major accident. But if you cheat that design, then he'll kill you all in the reverse of the order you would have died in the cleanup act. That's a bit convoluted and nonsensical, even in a world where you're making up rules about death. And it can be done right. Just look at Death Note. They designed a bunch of rules and used them for an awesome story with tons of strategy and back and forth. Suddenly, a tire blows out, and Kat's SUV veers off the road onto a farm. A white van swerves out of the way, one driven by the cop taking Isabella to the hospital. That van continues on while the SUV crashes into a bunch of pipes. Eugene gets his lung punctured. They quickly get him to an ambulance. Everyone else is okay, until some firefighters working on the SUV set off the airbag, inadvertently slamming the back of Kat's skull into one of those pipes. Now dead, she drops her cigarette into the puddle of gasoline left by a news van, haphazardly parked on a rock that punctured the tank. The resulting explosion launches a couple of fence posts, with the wires between them as a makeshift garrote, slicing Rory into 3 sharp cuts of beef. And that's a quote from the screenplay. I take no credit. There's definitely a degree of diminishing returns watching these characters die, but this scene at least changes the pace. Usually it's a series of red herrings, build up, and then boom, someone dies. But this time there's build up, then Eugene gets hurt, then things calm down, you get lulled into a false sense of security, boom, 2 deaths, one right after the other. Then Kimberly, Clear, and Burke rush to the hospital, and this happens. Another vision, this time of a nurse giving her CPR, though for some reason she interprets it as the nurse choking her, which is very dumb. Also, Kimberly, she's a doctor, not a nurse. A lot of bad assumptions going on around here. Now, because Isabella drives a white van, they assume these visions are from her perspective. So now Kimberly is worried that Nurse Kalargian is going to try and kill Isabella before she can give birth to the baby that could save all their lives. The murder nurse thing is weird, and the random visions are lame. It somehow feels more believable when premonitions and signs happen immediately before an event, but when they seemingly occur at random just to drive the plot forward, it feels more like the writers making things up as they go along. The survivors rush to the hospital, where Isabella gives birth to a healthy child. Life that was never meant to be, right? Wrong. Kimberly has another random vision, not a premonition, but a postmonition, where she sees the past and sees that Isabella did not die on Route 23, not even in her premonition, meaning her baby's life was always meant to be. They've changed nothing. And now another premonition, drowning in the van again, then CPR from Dr. Kalargian, but who is driving the van? Still unclear, but someone with bloody hands. A vision from a first-person point of view. I wonder who it could be. Clear runs to check on Eugene. She opens the door. A plug is unplugged, creating a spark. Normally no problem, except death. Close the vents and burst the oxygen tube. Spark plus oxygen equals incineration. Eugene and Clear both explode. This was a shocking moment. We aren't too attached to any of these characters, but in place of real character development, Clear at least gets, hey, I know that person value by returning from a previous movie. It was also a nice fake out. At first, Eugene's oxygen tank gets unplugged. He starts to suffocate, but right after Isabella gives birth, it switches to emergency power. For a second, we're tricked into believing they really are saved. Then this. Though it's also disappointing how little Clear was given to do in this movie. It was interesting at first to see how she's changed between movies, but there's no real arc to her deciding to leave her padded cell. Just, you're a coward, fine, I'll help. And after that, she's not much different than any other character, just slightly more paranoid and cynical. Clear's blood gets on Kimberly's hands, and suddenly she realizes it's Kimberly herself in the premonition. Who would have thought? Now she knows what must be done. New life that wasn't meant to be. She has to drown in the van and die temporarily before Dr. Kalargian brings her back to life. She gives Burke a kiss on the cheek, and that's a quick reminder of how little we care about these characters and the flimsy bonds between them. Kimberly takes an ambulance, drives it into the lake, and drowns, except Burke fishes her out of the water and Kalargian brings her back to life. They're saved! But remember when they crashed on that farm? The people who owned the place had kindly let them borrow their truck to get to the hospital. Sometime later, after such a harrowing experience, that family, the Gibbons, invite Kimberly and Burke over for a barbecue, where they share a funny story. Their son Brian was almost hit by a news van that day, except Rory tackled him out of the way, saving his life. Wait a minute, Rory was supposed to die on Route 23, meaning he shouldn't have been alive, meaning Brian should be dead. As though on cue, the grill explodes and his arm lands on the table in front of his mother. Horror movies have to end with, you thought they were finished, but wait, the bad guy comes back one more time. And this is a slightly more clever way to do it than the first movie. In Final Destination, Death just sits on his hands for 6 months without explanation before coming back at the end in Paris. But here, you expect some delay because Death usually waits at least a little before coming back for those who cheat his design. It's also the sort of twist you could see coming because they told us the rules, and we did see Rory save that kid. Though thinking about it some more, the news van was only there because of the crash. And if they'd all died on Route 23, they wouldn't have been in the SUV, they wouldn't have crashed, and there wouldn't have been a news van. Meaning, by saving Brian, Rory was actually maintaining Death's design. Well, I guess you can't trust Death after all. Who would have thought? Anyway, here's the final score. Final Destination 2 pulls slightly ahead of the original, mostly thanks to better pacing and more inventive kills, but how will 3 stack up? How about 4 and 5? Like, subscribe, and stay tuned to find out.